It's a tradition in Kentucky. Candidates for governor release their taxes, but not Matt Bevin. Bevin said he won't show Kentuckians his tax returns until after he's elected. After. This is the same Matt Bevin who failed to pay the taxes he owed on his $1 million vacation home in Maine, and had 8 tax liens filed against his business in Connecticut. What else is Matt Bevin hiding? We can't trust him to be for us.
A pitcher who can paint the corners is known as a Rembrandt. At GMC, we get why people love that kind of precision. After all, that's exactly.
So they're already hit with the commercials coming up. I got a prediction that the first question they asked Drew Curtis will be
for 5 years.
So what are you doing, man? What the fuck? What the fuck? You have no shot. You got no chance. Why are you even in this race? Why are you even here?
Visit your GMC dealer today.
Ear pain, jaw pop, is it TMJ?
Prediction,
call Dr. Boy today.
Knocks it out of the park.
From Sony Pictures Studios, it's America's Game. Ladies and gentlemen, here are the stars of our show. And 6.
Need for them?
Wrong channel.
I don't want to say it's the...
This week, the bill.
Team President. Of course, Fiorina will be the only woman debating tomorrow night. Issue for Republicans. How do they get more women to run for president?
The next shot, he was just...
And CEO.
Goes in.
Towards the playoffs, and
Vicky Gardner is...
She's always on the go.
Recorded early yesterday morning, investigators say the man...
Station WKYT is on the panel questioning the candidates. Earlier tonight, he talked with fellow panelist Sam Youngman of the Lexington Herald-Leader about what to expect.
Good evening from Louisville. The crowd is seated and we are moments away from the first televised gubernatorial debate of the 2015 campaign. It is being sponsored by WKYT and the Lexington Herald-Leader in Lexington, as well as WHAS-TV in Louisville and the Courier-Journal. And I'm joined now by Sam Youngman, political writer for the Herald-Leader, and this has been an interesting campaign, but this is the first time that the candidates will really be forced to take on a variety of issues in front of the cameras.
Yeah, I'm really excited to see what happens tonight. It's been a quiet summer because none of these candidates are named Donald Trump. People really haven't been paying attention. And obviously there are a lot of critical issues facing the state and facing whomever the next governor is. So I'm ready to get going.
Would you anticipate fireworks tonight, or do you think everybody will be on their best behavior?
Well, I'll tell you a little secret. I have no idea what to expect. You know, this is a campaign that so far has mostly taken place in commercials. So I'm eager to see, I think just as much as our viewers are, what version of the candidate is going to show up tonight.
We saw that raucous goings on at Fancy Farm.
Right.
We have seen, as you said, some pretty tough TV spots already. So as we head into tonight, this may very well let us know what the rest of the tone of the campaign could be like.
Oh, I think so. I think you hit the nail on the head. This is going to set the tone for the rest of the fall campaign. We're going to be on better behavior tonight than we are usually at Fancy Farm. There won't be the hooting and hollering that we love so much in Western Kentucky. But look, like I said, it's been a quiet summer campaign. Now we get started. Now voters are going to start tuning in, and what better way to kick things off than with a debate.
Moments away from your chance to learn more about the candidates for Kentucky governor tonight.
Now, you can also take part in tonight's debate. Submit questions for the candidates on Twitter using the hashtag #BluegrassDebate. So, we're going to go now to Bellarmine University in Louisville Live for the first televised debate in this year's governor's race.
Are you or not?
Well, we're having a little bit of satellite trouble, I understand, as we await the first televised debate in the governor's race between Jack Conway, the Democrat, Attorney General Jack Conway, Republican Matt Bevin, and Independent Drew Curtis. It'll probably be the first time for many folks to hear anything from Drew Curtis. He's not been advertising. Of course, he does not have the war chest as the Republicans and Democrats do.
Of course.
Do we have the signal back? All right. We do have the signal now, I believe, and so let's go back to Bellarmine College in Louisville for the governor's debate, the first televised governor's debate. There's going to be another one later in October, and also a lieutenant governor's debate next week.
Yeah, but you didn't invite Heather Curtis.
So now live to the governor's debate in Louisville.
Which include withholding applause and reactions during tonight's debate, with this one exception right now as we welcome this evening's candidates. Democrat Jack Conway.
Drew Curtis in the middle.
Independent Drew Curtis. Republican Matt Bevin. Now, the order of questions and our closing statements tonight are the result of a random draw. We begin now our first question from Lexington Herald leaders, Sam Youngman.
Mr. Bevin, when you unveiled your blueprint for Kentucky in February, you were asked if you would end the state's expansion of Medicaid. Your response was, absolutely, no question about it, I would end that immediately. Last week you said you would tweak Medicaid. Can you tell us which is it, and what would that tweak look like?
Sure, it would look very much like using 1115 waivers, which were essentially to ask from CMS for the equivalent of a block grant. There is no way, given the current construct of Medicaid, be it 90-10, be it 70-30, or even at 100%, that we can afford as a state to ultimately continue to maintain the current structure as it exists. And so we cannot continue to have people 25 growing to 30% of this state on Medicaid as Medicaid currently exists. So what is necessary is for us as a state, immediately, in the same way that we expanded this with executive action, to apply to CMS for 1115 waivers, to use those dollars to customize a solution specifically for Kentuckians. We want to have as many Kentuckians as we possibly can covered with as much health care as is possible at the most affordable price for the Kentucky taxpayers.
Drew Curtis, 30 seconds.
Yes, there was a study done by Deloitte that says that we should be able to pay for the first round of expense that the state is going to rack up for the Medicaid expansion in 2017. And it also projects that we should make it to the 10% level in 2020. Given that, and given this fact that we have already forced people to make a broad transition as it is, which is not costless in the slightest, my recommendation would be to leave it alone as it is.
Jack Conway, 30 seconds.
Well, I would continue upon what Governor Steve Beshear has done. What my opponent, Mr. Bevin, has said very clearly is that he would take an action, as Sam said, that absolutely, no doubt about it, he would reverse that immediately. In effect, that's going to kick 500,000 people off of health insurance based on something we can or can't afford in 2021. If we can't afford something in 2021, we can always scale back, but I think that the action that Mr. Bevin proposes is callous.
Our next question tonight comes from the Courier-Journal's Joe Girth.
Mr. Curtis, the State Department of Energy and Environment has been hard hit by budget cuts over the past 8 years, leaving its ability to conduct inspections, to enforce environmental laws diminished. What would you do to reverse this, if anything? And if so, where would you find the money to do it?
As I understand it, it is in dire shape from a funding perspective, and it does need to be brought back. The problem is, and this is going to be an issue with almost every funding question that we have, there is no money. And until we can solve the more pressing problems of the pensions and how to get more jobs in play, I'm afraid that there's not really going to be much we can do until hopefully 2016, when the budget office projects we should maybe get another 5% boost. My problem is that over the next 4 years, the likelihood of a recession is extremely high. And I don't think we can go tearing off into funding whatever we want to until we've actually gotten over this hump. Because if you end up taking a 4% hit in 2 years, then all of the funding, all the expanded plan programs that you've gotten will fall apart almost instantly. And so as a result, I think we have to be very careful for these next couple of years to navigate a couple of extremely bad economic bombs that are on the horizon. And so unfortunately, as much as I would like to do something about it, probably can't.
Jack Conway, 30 seconds.
Well, sure. Well, Joe, thank you for the question. As Attorney General, I've done more with less. I mean, we've had to cut our office's budget by 40%, and yet we've done more with less. And I agree with Drew. There's probably not enough money out there to start putting back in all this personnel. But if you look at the Energy and Environment Cabinet, through technology, through making certain that we're more efficient and creating a balanced approach that both supports our energy economy and doing right by the environment, I think we can make it work.
Matt Bevin, 30 seconds.
The reality is, as has been noted, budget is tight in this state. It will continue to be. What we need is, frankly, more economic opportunity for everybody in Kentucky. We need more jobs. We need a greater percentage of our workforce participating in the workforce. We need a greater percentage of people contributing. We need more people paying less each rather than squeezing more and more from fewer and fewer. This will allow us the monies needed to fund this and every other cabinet where we have been cutting back, including in things like higher education as well.
Our next question from WKYT TV's Bill Bryant.
Mr. Conway, a lifetime pension has been guaranteed to our state's retired employees and retired teachers, but we're all aware the state has not put back enough money to cover future obligations, even though the courts have said those checks must be sent out. It has now negatively impacted Kentucky's bond rating. How would you come up with the billions of dollars required to fund those pensions, and would you make benefit changes for current and future workers?
Well, I think it's important to note, Bill, that in the state employees retirement system, we have made changes for current and future hires. In the past 6 years, we've changed it twice. We've now gone to a hybrid system, part defined benefit, part defined contribution. We're making employees pay more. So in the out years, it's taking care of itself. The problem is right now, because we've got a big liability, and we got into this mess over the last 10 years or so. It's going to take 10 or 15 years to get out of it. I'm committed to making the full arc for the state employees retirement systems, and I eagerly await the commission report that Governor Beshear has set up. And one thing that we have to do is certainly stand by a defined benefit plan for our state teachers because they don't participate in Social Security.
Matt Bevin, 30 seconds.
I think it's important to understand that we are going to have to make fundamental change. We did change 2 years ago to a cash balance plan. It comes with a guaranteed rate of return. The guaranteed rate of return is 4%. This year, the market to date is down roughly 3%. That's a 7% differential. That's $70 million for every $1 billion that is in the plan. We are digging deeper and deeper into the hole. We are going to have to change the structure in order to be able to fulfill the legal and moral obligation of ensuring that the checks are given to the teachers and the other state retirees as promised.
Drew Curtis, 30 seconds.
I proposed a plan that sort of expands upon the bonding suggestion that has been made by the KTRS folks, which is basically instead of taking a large bond out and investing that for a higher rate of return, instead structure it like a line of credit and tap it as needed. And the idea would be is that if you have a good year, you can then lot tap it, you can take the overage that you make if you have a good return and pay it down, and if you have a bad year, you can tap as needed.
The next question is from WHAS 11's Renee Murphy.
Mr. Bevin, are you concerned the Kim Davis saga and your support for her attempts to not issue marriage licenses will cast Kentucky in a negative light and make companies that favor diversity think twice about locating here?
Not concerned about that at all. I think it's been fantastic that we as a state have been at the forefront of recognizing the fact that there are no rights that anyone has that suppress the rights of others under the Constitution of the United States. That the 14th Amendment rights of some that have been interpreted of late by the Supreme Court to afford same-sex couples and others to marry do not come at the expense of or not mutually exclusive to the First Amendment rights of our county clerks. I put out a proposal back in July that would have prevented this entire carnival from taking place. And indeed, if we had leadership on the part of our current governor and our current attorney general, who's the chief law enforcer in this state, who cried before the camera and told us that he could not do his job some years ago, and in fact now has the audacity to tell Kim Davis that it's her job to do her job or quit. Where is the double standard in this? Where is our governor when it was time to tell Jack Conway to do the same? I think it's appropriate that we defend the First Amendment rights of every single Kentuckian. This is something that our state law affords us to do.
Jack Conway, 30 seconds.
Well, when I went in front of the cameras a year and a half ago, I said to Kentuckians that, look, the good-paying jobs of the future are coming to states with policies of inclusivity. And what I didn't want to do was waste hundreds of thousands of dollars defending a case that ultimately we weren't going to win. And not only have we lost hundreds of thousands of dollars, the lawyers on the other side are petitioning for millions of dollars now. And look, I think Kim Davis went to jail because she defied a federal court order. I have sympathy for her, but we are a nation of laws.
Drew Curtis, 30 seconds.
I think you're both wrong. As the executive, you have an oath to uphold the laws of the land of your state, regardless of whether you believe in them or not. and you have to do it. Now, you can say it's stupid while you uphold the laws, but you must actually uphold the laws regardless of whether you agree with them or not. And that's the only thing that's the case. When the rule of law is not upheld, society falls apart at the seams.
Now, we are welcoming your comments and questions to the candidates on Twitter and Facebook using the hashtag tonight, hashtag Bluegrass Debate. And here tonight with one of those questions is Bellarmine University student Hunter Collins. Hunter.
Thank you. Evening, candidates. This next question comes from Chris Renee of Louisville. Chris writes, budget cuts have resulted in schools without books students can bring home to study. What are your solutions? Mr. Curtis, you can start.
I don't currently have any solutions for budget cuts. We have an unfunded pension liability that we need to take care of first that will bankrupt this state in 3 years. I'm very hopeful that, as projections indicate, we'll have another 5 to 10% run before the next recession hits. And if that happens, I'd be more than willing to take a look at that in 2016, but currently it doesn't look like there's anything on the table. As strongly as I feel that these programs do work and they are important, I think they're going to have to wait just a little longer.
Matt Bevin.
I think it's important to remember that and it's important especially as we meet here at Bellarmine University, we spend $1 billion a year in our state universities in post-secondary education, taxpayer dollars that are spent on post-secondary education. It is not a function of whether we're spending enough of the taxpayers' dollars as much as it is a function of how are we spending those dollars. Are we being good stewards of those dollars? This is going to be incumbent upon whoever the next governor is to ensure that as we talk about reintroducing dollars back into the budget from the general fund, that we do so in a way that incentivizes the type of training and the type of vocational training and technical training that results in jobs for the future. When we have jobs that need to be filled, we want to ensure that the graduates of our universities are prepared for those jobs.
Jack Conway.
Well, thank you for the question. I think Governor Beshear has certainly led us with integrity in protecting the SEEK formula over the last 8 years. And currently we're projecting a $219 million surplus for the next budget cycle. I think one of the top priorities for that ought to be the educational system. I mean, we have teachers in this state who are going out and using their own money to purchase textbooks and purchase supplies. That's not right. And I also don't think the answer is what my opponent has proposed, which is a pure voucher system, which would just give money to parents and basically say, hey, use it at public schools, private schools, or for homeschooling. I certainly don't think that's the answer.
Thank you, Hunter.
Thank you.
Our next question from our journalists is from Sam Youngman.
Mr. Curtis, you've said you're agnostic, quote, agnostic toward coal. Does coal have a future in Kentucky? And if so, what, if anything, should the next governor do to try and help a struggling industry?
Coal does have a future in Kentucky, and it's really a basis of how much energy costs. I have people tell me all the time, wouldn't it be great if we set up solar farms and wind farms in eastern Kentucky? Well, sure it would. At 18 cents a kilowatt hour, that's not exactly going to work out. Who's going to buy versus 3 cents a kilowatt hour? If the technology actually changes, and there was a new solar technology that came out about 2 months ago that dropped it down to 4 cents a kilowatt hour, now we're starting to talk about a competitive price, and that might actually be the thing that puts coal in jeopardy. But as long as coal has the price power, they're in charge. What surprises me, and perhaps I haven't talked to any coal companies because they don't invite me to debates that they don't announce. I don't know why, probably because I won't sell them laws, but if I had a better understanding of why, unlike the oil companies that friends of mine work for down in Texas, they don't seem to have an alternative energy plan, it seems to me it would make sense if you're an energy company that can predict your economic path 3 years out, that it might be a good idea to have an alternate solution in play.
Jack Conway, 30 seconds.
I think coal absolutely has a future in Kentucky. I think what we need is a governor to market coal. And look, I've always put people over politics and then put Kentucky first. And I've been the only Democratic Attorney General in the country to stand up to the EPA when it is overreached and has tried to hurt our coal industry, and not just hurt our coal industry, Sam, but hurt our low-cost electricity advantage, which we use to lure jobs here in all sorts of sectors. So I'm proud to be the only Democratic Attorney General that has stood up for the future of coal.
Matt Bevin, 30 seconds.
If the future of America and the future of the world's consumption of coal does not, or of energy, does not assume the use of coal, the bridge from where we are to where we're going will be built of coal. It still powers 90% of the lights on in this room. It powers 38% of the electricity in this state. Currently in Germany, they're building coal-fired power plants from scratch because they know that they need to avoid the brownouts that they had last winter. Coal is critical. There's more being consumed now than ever in the history of the world, and we need to participate here in Kentucky. I will tell you, Jack Conway is the only one on this stage also that has taken thousands of dollars from the Sierra Club, whose website right now says that coal makes you sick and they want to see it abolished.
Our next question is from Joe Girth.
General Conway, you recently outlined an education plan, but said that you haven't scored it yet for the cost of it, and you haven't identified exactly where money would come from to pay for it. How can voters assume that you're going to do any of these things if we don't know basics such as that?
Well, I would say, Joe, take a look at my record. I have a record of Attorney General of doing more with less. I mean, I cut my office's own budget by 40%. For every dollar the General Assembly has given us, we've actually returned $4 to the state treasury. I've returned over $300 million to the state treasury. And what I'm talking about in the area of early childhood education is something that's easily affordable. There's a potential of federal funding streams becoming available. We could be more efficient with our resources. We certainly can work with our school districts to build out capacity and focus on kindergarten readiness. I mean, folks, that's something I want to do from day one. It's something my wife wants to make her signature issue if she becomes a first lady. I mean, the child that's ready for kindergarten will test well in the 3rd grade, the 6th grade, go on to be college and career ready. But we have an opponent in this race who said that early childhood education serves no purpose and that kids forget it all by the age of 9. We're projecting a $219 million surplus next year. My opponent always says we're broke. Money is tight. But if we're fiscally responsible, Joe, we can certainly make it happen, particularly in the area of early childhood education.
Drew Curtis, 30 seconds.
Yeah, I hesitate to point this out, but unfortunately your solutions always seem to be, I'll fund this. And the problem is that you've actually got to have the funds that come from somewhere. I'm in agreement with Mr. Conway that these programs are all extremely valuable and useful in many, many ways, but we just don't have the money. There was a surplus this year that was actually gotten from a fund transfer, grabbed from the state employees' health insurance fund, among other places.
Matt Bevin, 30 seconds.
Yeah, again, it's critical that we recognize where does funding come from, whether it's as it related to early childhood education or any other thing that is being proposed. It is imperative that we have the monies to actually pay for these things. To assume that I'm not a proponent of early childhood education is nonsense. I have 9 children, for crying out loud. I know just a little bit about early childhood education and the years beyond as well. This is critical. We've got to spend the money there, but let's be good stewards of those dollars. Let's think about getting a good return on the taxpayer's dollar. This is how we will succeed.
Our next question is from WKYT-TV's Bill Bryant.
And first to Mr. Bevin, we all like the lower gasoline prices we see right now, but Kentucky's Highway Fund is tied directly to the price of gasoline, which has dropped substantially over the last year. So as the roads and bridges like the Brent Spence Bridge, which carries I-75 over the Ohio River, are deteriorating and crumbling, the state's ability to repair them and to do something about that is curtailed, even as they are the busiest they've ever been. As money runs short, do you support public-private partnerships or tolling or other options to try to get some of these projects done?
What I would encourage listeners and viewers out there to do, go to the State Chamber of Commerce website and take a look at when I give a much longer answer than I'll have in the next 45 seconds to answer this. Public-private partnerships assume that the middle part, the private part, will make a profit. That profit will be made at the expense of taxpayers. That is their right. That is their assumption. That's the reason that they participate. And it's important for us to understand that there's a cost to these things. Spending money today that we don't have, coming from someone else, comes at a cost to the future. And we are sticking it to our young people, those that have not even yet graduated from this institution and others, to bear the brunt of paying off that debt so that we can have things today. We've got to be thoughtful about this. There is a time and place. University of Kentucky right now is building student housing using P3 partnerships. It's working out well. There's a good return on that investment immediately available to people. As it relates to the Brent Spence Bridge, I think that would be a bad idea to use it for key infrastructure projects in that regard.
Jack Conway, 30 seconds.
I am happy, Bill, that the legislature in this last session put a floor on the motor fuels tax. I think that the road fund being healthy is an important thing for investments throughout Kentucky, particularly in our counties and our county road funds. I have a running mate, Sandy Overley, who's a real expert in transportation, and she'll be integrally involved in all of these decisions. But I have an opponent here, Mr. Bevin, who said that we ought to let the road fund go to zero and audit it for the last 10 years. And he's been clear that he opposes P3 legislation. I actually think having P3 in the toolbox is another tool to help us get the job done.
Drew Curtis, 30 seconds.
There definitely needs to be some restructuring. PPP is not a problem depending on how the deal structure actually works, and as long as it's been vetted properly to the point where people aren't getting a bad deal, then we're in good shape. And by that I mean, if a hedge fund wants to buy it, why is the state not buying it? we should ask ourselves that question when taking a look at it. However, it turns out in some cases, I asked the question out loud, why does the pension system not invest in infrastructure? And it turns out because sometimes these projects are too large, and that's when you need to bring in outside help.
Our next question is from WHAS TV's Renee Murphy.
Mr. Conway, Louisville is on pace to see more gunshot wound victims than in previous years, and trauma surgeons say the number of children and teenagers they are treating is alarming. But this problem is not unique to Louisville. It's an issue across the Commonwealth. What plan do you have to help curb gun violence in Kentucky?
Well, I would say this, Renee. I've been supported by the NRA in the past, and I've always stood up for sportsmen's issues. I do think making certain that we have plans in place to look at mental health issues so that guns don't fall into the hands of people who have mental health problems is a big thing for the future. If you look at the mental health registries we're supposed to have in the respective states, they're not there. They're not there, and the ability to check and make certain that people who have mental health issues don't get guns really aren't there. And I also believe that we need a stronger policing corps. Now, I know we need to do more with less, but having community-oriented policing, having police on the streets who actually know the neighborhoods and know how the kids get in trouble in their respective neighborhoods is really the best thing that we can do. And I will certainly, as a Louisvillian, knowing how important that is to West Louisville and neighborhoods like Newburgh, certainly focus on that issue.
Matt Bevan, 30 seconds.
I think it's important to understand two things. First of all, so much of what comes out of your mouth, Jack, is absolutely made up. I've never once called for letting anything go to zero and auditing it. You literally just make lies up on the fly. So I would challenge those of you watching, check very carefully with the facts. With respect to gun control, Jack Conway has a C rating with the NRA. He will not have their endorsement in this race. He is not someone who is a strong supporter of our Second Amendment rights. I'm a concealed carry gun owner, so is my wife, so is my running mate, so is her husband. This shall not be infringed. It is an important part of who we are as Kentuckians, and I will defend it at every turn.
Drew Curtis, 30 seconds.
I agree with General Conway. I think that mental health is a big part of this problem. We need to take a harder look at people who are able to get the guns and make sure that the mental health issues are taken care of. But properly, too. I talked to somebody once recently who said he'd once been treated for depression and he was afraid that he would not be able to own a gun. The problem with people who don't live in this state, and I'm not going to be able to finish this in time, am I, is that you don't realize how long it takes first responders to reach some places, and therefore we have to look at other methods of solving gun violence other than limiting access to guns.
Back to our panelists in a few minutes. The candidates now have an opportunity to question each other. So, gentlemen, please keep your questions to a maximum of 20 seconds. These are questions and not speeches. Jack Conway is first. Please direct your question to one of the two other candidates. Mr. Conway.
Mr. Bevan, I have followed Kentucky's bipartisan tradition of releasing my tax returns. I have heard that Mr. Curtis plans to release his as well. What is it in your tax returns that you don't want the people of Kentucky to see?
It's interesting that when Jack Conway tries to get you to focus on things like my tax returns, which are not required to be released, it is a distraction from the fact that he didn't defend this state's constitution. It's a distraction from the fact that he doesn't support life, which 2/3 of Kentuckians do. It's a distraction from the fact that he refuses to enforce the requirement by the University of Louisville Board, among others, to be racially and politically balanced. He's a man who will not do his job but wants to create smokescreens. He puts forward education policy that doesn't have any way to pay for it. It is a smokescreen. There have been any number of other gubernatorial candidates, such as John Y. Brown and others, Democrats and Republicans alike, who have never fallen for this trap. I would encourage you as viewers, pay attention to what really matters in this race and not the noise coming from Jack Conway.
Mr. Curtis, 30 seconds.
So I'll actually answer this question. I'm okay releasing my tax returns. I'm not sure why anybody wants them. If anybody would like a tour of my house, you're welcome to come on over. My kids are kind of cool. There's trains everywhere on the floors. You're probably going to break your legs walking through the living room. So I'm not really sure what the problem is with that. But
Mr. Conway, you have 30 seconds for rebuttal.
Well, it's an issue of transparency. As the Kentucky Colonel said today in their editorial, when you run for office, you're held to a higher standard. And as Attorney General, I think I have a record of transparency. I have a record of doing more with less. Mr. Bevan is fond of going around saying, who do you trust? Who do you trust to be the next governor? I don't think he trusts someone who has had his own problems with tax issues and won't release his tax returns. That doesn't instill confidence in Democrats or Republicans.
Next, Mr. Curtis, please direct your question to one of the two other candidates.
Sure. Mr. Bevan, you have claimed that you're the only person who's in this race who has a pension solution. I believe that I'm the only person in this race who has a pension solution. I know you've been trying to ignore me, and I appreciate that. However, I would like you to explain, using the most specific math possible, exactly how your solution works.
Well, I'll tell you this. First of all, I was the only person before you got in the race, and Jack Conway still hasn't put forward a solution. So in fairness, you now have joined, which I appreciate. I put out a solution months and months ago. We need to move to a defined contribution plan for all new hires. This idea of borrowing money, creating a credit card, a line of credit for legislators in Frankfurt. Do any of you out there trust the people in Frankfurt to have the ability to tap into a credit card at your expense? We're going to stick it to the future. It is nothing other than a variation of bonding. We need to move to a defined contribution plan that will require every new hire, not those currently in the system, but every future hire, to have more responsibility and more flexibility in controlling their own investment system and their own ability to save for their own future.
Jack Conway, 30 seconds.
Well, the ARC is not something I learned about in this campaign. It's called the Actuarial Required Contribution. It's something we're going to have to make each and every year for our state employees. We got into this mess because we made assumptions and didn't make payments into the fund. We can make this payment into the fund over the next 8 or 10 years and work our way out of this problem, but it's going to take time. But I would say this, for teachers out there, we cannot move our teachers into a defined contribution plan because they don't participate in Social Security, and people need to understand that.
Drew Curtis, you have 30 more seconds.
So the difficulty with your plan on a math basis is that the money's not there. We can't convert everybody over to a 401k style plan right now because we're 15% funded, I know. And we cannot start swiftly new hires into it because the shortfall in the revenue that occurs when you do that bankrupts the system a good year earlier. And I'll make a spreadsheet for you and I'll send it over.
Mr. Bevan, your question for one of the other two candidates.
My question is for Mr. Conway. You have stood time and again calling on people like Kim Davis, for example, to do her job or quit. My question for you is, why did you not do your job as it related to defending the Constitution of the state, but more critically and more importantly, I want to know why you are not doing your job now as it relates to the fact that for the first time since 1958, there's no African-American representation on the University of Louisville board. You are the chief law enforcement officer of this state. It is your responsibility to take our governor to task on this issue. Why are you not doing so?
Well, that was 2 or 3 questions, Matt, but I'll do my best. When it comes to the U of L board, I took a pledge this past Saturday that when I'm elected, I'm going to make certain we have adequate and appropriate African-American representation on the University of Louisville board. That's a pledge I make for June of next year. With regards to Mrs. Davis, look, passions are running high on both sides of this issue. But I did defend our marriage amendment. And when I read Judge Habron's opinion, I realized he was right. And KRS Chapter 15 gives me the discretion to either appeal or not appeal. In fact, the state's highest court has said my duty is to tell the state when things are unconstitutional. That's what I did. I did that to save us money. And that is very different, Mr. Bevan. That is very different than ignoring a federal judge's court order. We're a nation of laws.
Mr. Curtis, 30 seconds.
Minority representation on U of L's board, I'll get right on that. Give me a couple months. I'm not there yet. As for the Kim Davis situation, again, I think it is the job of the executive to back up even the laws they don't like in both of these situations. Even if you don't like them, you must execute the law as the oath of office states and don't be in a duel.
Mr. Bevan, 30 seconds.
Yeah, I would say, first of all, a couple things is important. Go back to the fact that the teachers, if they went to a defined contribution plan, would not have Social Security. You can change that. Teachers could, with a defined contribution plan, have access to Social Security. That's important. The bottom line is, Jack, you saying you're going to wait until June to do your job is a cop-out. And it's what you've done a lot of since you've been an elected official. You've never worked in the real world. You've hidden behind false promises. You've hidden behind your political jobs through the years. And you saying you will do your job once you're governor, but you won't do it as Attorney General, is unacceptable to many.
Our next question is from the Herald Leaders, Sam Youngman. Attorney General Conway, as you know, this summer, Frankfurt lawmakers were forced to settle a lawsuit, a sexual harassment lawsuit, after allegations were made against a member of your party. During your time in Frankfurt, what have you done to make the state's capital a safer workplace for women, and what more needs to be done?
Oh gosh, let me count the ways that we've made the state's state workplace a better place for women. Let me say, first of all, that issue is one for the General Assembly. Okay? That really didn't have anything to do with the Office of the Attorney General. Now, the Kentucky State Police certainly looked into it. They did an investigation of the former LRC director. There was a settlement. But I can tell you this. When I became Attorney General, I think half of my directors were women. My first chief deputy was a woman. I'm married to a strong professional woman in Elizabeth Davenport Conway. I've got 2 little girls. I even got a female dog. They've got me surrounded, Sam, I tell you what. So I get good advice from women every single day. And I'm so honored to have on my ticket Sandy Overly, who's the first woman in Kentucky history actually to be elected to House leadership. So I can assure you that with the ticket of Jack Conway and Sandy Overly, you're going to have an administration that is very in tune with making certain we have a safe place for women in Frankfort.
Matt Bevan, 30 seconds.
I think it's important for viewers to understand that the absolute shenanigans that went on, the sexual harassment that went on in the Democrat Party, in the legislature in Frankfort, that you as taxpayers have just paid $400,000 to put away, is unacceptable. And it is your responsibility to call attention to that, Jack, and it was the responsibility of your running mate, Sandy Overly, who was deposed and had her deposition sealed because she didn't want people to know that these women went to her as the first woman in leadership, thinking they would find somebody that would have their back, and she didn't.
Drew Curtis, 30 seconds.
I'm a strong believer in diversity, and I think I'm just going to leave it at that because I don't really feel like attacking anyone right now, so thank you.
Our next question comes from the Courier-Journal's Joe Girth.
Mr. Bevan, we have a record number of people in Kentucky who have either been in prison or in prison now, many of them for nonviolent drug offenses. Do you favor automatic restoration of civil rights and or expungement of felony records for some of these nonviolent offenders?
The question automatic needs to be defined. But am I a supporter of us considering the restoration of these rights? Absolutely. Am I a supporter of the consideration for expungement? Absolutely. I spoke about this at length in an hour-long interview today on WFPL, and I would encourage people to listen to that podcast where we went into it in detail. America is a land of second chances. We are a land that gives people opportunity to redeem themselves. And this is no different in this instance. For non-violent crimes, for those where there is no victim, where people have paid their penance, where people have paid their restitution, where they have done what is expected of them, and where they have stayed out of trouble, absolutely people should have the ability to have their voting rights returned to them, have this expunged from their records so that they have the ability to assimilate back into society without any question. Not only will I encourage such legislation to be brought forward, not only would I sign such legislation, I will make a point of shepherding such legislation to the best of my ability as the next governor of this state.
Drew Curtis, 30 seconds.
When I started this run for governor, I was shocked to find out relatively quickly that there were 180,000 Kentuckians who are currently ex-felons who have been off of probation long enough to where we shouldn't care about that anymore. We need to get this problem taken care of. This is the new Jim Crow law, and it's been in effect for a long time. We need to change the way expungement works. So instead of people having to claim that they should be expunged, we should have the government explain why they should not.
Jack Conway, 30 seconds.
First of all, let me say, yes, I support Jeff Hoover's recent bill, for example, that says for nonviolent offenders that have completed their sentences that they should automatically get their voting rights restored. I think that is absolutely critical, and I would agree with Mr. Curtis on that. And I would also say that, look, as your Attorney General, as the state's chief law enforcement officer for the last 8 years, I've been tough where I've needed to be on drugs, but I've also, for example, on the issue of drugs, I've gone in front of 45,000 kids to educate them and have focused on treatment as well.
Our next question is from Bill Bryant.
Mr. Curtis, yours is a non-conventional campaign in many ways. You have taken the step of choosing your wife as your running mate, as an example. Since we started requiring the governor and lieutenant governor to run together 20 years ago, few have gotten along. Some have...
I have good news for you.
Some have quit talking to each other. One was heard on a recording calling the governor under whom he was serving the worst ever. Are there issues that you and your running mate disagree about?
Oh, plenty. There's no doubt. In fact, that's one of the things that makes this ticket so strong is the fact that we bring two completely different viewpoints to the situation. She's more liberal than I am. I am more strategy-oriented. She is more operationally oriented. I've been surprised by the number of people who think that it's a strange thing. I'm really starting to question all the rest of your marriages. Because I think you're doing something wrong if that's confusing. But that's not my problem. I'm going to stay out of it. But I will say this. My wife has been the CEO of my tech company, Fark.com, for the last 17 years. And we've worked side by side because in order to have a successful technology company, you must have strategy and operations. And if you don't have both, you cannot provide effective leadership. So when it came to choose who I should pick to join me in this venture, she was the obvious choice because she's the other half of the equation.
Jack Conway, 30 seconds.
That recalls for me what I heard when Jamie Comer made his announcement for governor back in January. If you recall, in the Capitol Rotunda, he called for the spouses to debate. And I looked at somebody and I said, well, be careful what you wish for, Drew. I haven't wanted to debate with mine in 17 years. So I'm glad you've got that kind of relationship. But let me say, with Sandy Overly, we have somebody who is a civil engineer, put herself through law school, a champion on human trafficking issues, and the first woman in Kentucky's history elected to House leadership. She's going to be an equal partner in our administration, and she's really outstanding.
Matt Bevin, 30 seconds.
I could not have more respect for my running mate, Janine Hampton. First generation to ever go to college. Her mother didn't even graduate from high school. Grew up in abject poverty in the inner city. Has a degree in industrial engineering. Is a decorated war veteran. Military veteran active duty, recently inducted into the Kentucky Military Hall of Fame. Got an MBA at a top business school while working full-time. Has worked for decades in the private sector. 20 years working for a corrugated packaging company. Being a plant manager for a Fortune 500 company. As an African-American female, she is the first African-American to ever run for governor or lieutenant governor. We'll do great together.
The next question is from Renee Murphy.
Mr. Curtis, how do you plan to address Kentucky's growing drug problem? And do you believe a statewide needle exchange program is needed where intravenous drug users can swap out dirty needles for clean needles to prevent the spread of disease?
I'm going to answer the second part of this question first. I'll need you to remind me of the first part because I forget and people think I'm dodging. I'm not. I just forgot. Needle exchange, yes, I'm in favor of it. Without a doubt, it's been proven to work. The science bears it out. That's the only thing I need to see. As for the drug problem, I got asked this on a Reddit AMA that I did when I first announced my candidacy, and my first question was, what kind of law do you think I'm going to pass that will stop a heroin addict from taking a hit? I actually don't know. And so, as a result, and they told me on Reddit, they said, well, you can't just say that and have no answer. It's like, okay. So I went looking around, and I found that there is a program that we are working on with Massachusetts to deal with the opiate addiction epidemic that apparently is plaguing both states, which I really like. And they have rolled out a plan. I think it's at the $75 million range that they are starting to put into practice. We should sit back and watch and see if that works there, because if it does, it should work here, and we should copy it.
Matt Bevin, 30 seconds.
I hope what you really like is not that they're also wrestling with this issue, but I mean the bottom line is this: this is an issue that it's like squeezing a balloon. We squeezed the pain pill balloon, and we got the heroin problem. We've now squeezed that. We're going to end up with other issues. We've got to look at the source of this. How do you stop the root cause? We've got to get more able-bodied working-age men and women participating in the workforce. Give them the dignity and the self-respect and the self-responsibility that comes for providing for themselves. This is how we're going to remedy this. We've got to make sure that we put an ounce of prevention dollars in place so that we don't spend so much on the pound of cure.
Jack Conway, 30 seconds.
Well, I have made the fight against prescription pill abuse and drug abuse in general a very personal focus of my administration as your Attorney General. We've shut down, working with others, half the state's pain clinics. I've reached across the aisle with the Republican AG of Florida and shut down the pipeline of pills coming from there. I've worked on the heroin issue. I do think that the local option needle exchange is a good thing, but I've traveled this state with in front of 45,000 kids with two mothers who lost their kids and who talked to those kids. We need, I say this as our chief law enforcement officer, we need more treatment and we need more education.
Again, we are welcoming your comments throughout this debate using on Twitter and Facebook using the hashtag Bluegrass Debate. And now with yet another Twitter question, Bellarmine University student Patrick Griffo.
Derek Phillips has lived in Rowan, Oldham, and Jefferson counties. He believed by not issuing marriage licenses, Rowan County Clerk Ken Davis refuses to do the job she was elected to do, is in violation of her oath. Derek asked why official misconduct charges haven't been filed against her.
And this goes first to General Conway.
Well, I was given a referral from the Rowan County attorney as to whether or not there was official misconduct. And, you have a year to potentially look at that. But right now, this matter is in front of a federal judge. And it's not the time to go in and start looking at that. I mean, Judge Bunning has done a good job here. And look, I know passions are high on both sides of this issue. But look, this issue was never about clerks. It was about whether or not everyone in our society was entitled to equal justice under the law. And that's what it's about. And look, I understand passions are high, but in a regular session where we don't waste money, we can come up with a narrowly tailored solution to both uphold the Supreme Court decision and grant those few clerks some leeway if they have an objection.
Matt Bevin, 45 seconds.
I agree completely. It is about equal protection under the law. The 14th Amendment rights of one do not suppress or come at the expense of the First Amendment rights of someone else. The Constitution is a very broad document. It protects the religious liberties and the other constitutional liberties of all Americans. All Americans. And that's important for us to understand. With respect to what is the right approach, I have called for months. For us, frankly, it could be done with an executive action. It could also be done legislatively to affirm it even more. We could remove the names of the county clerks from these documents. That's all they're asking for. Nothing more. It would be as simple as that. That form could then be downloaded or picked up in hard copy. It could be filed with those county clerks like a deed, like a lien, like a mortgage. It would be solved. The situation would not have arisen.
Drew Curtis, 45 seconds.
We cannot allow government officials to have religious beliefs that interfere with their job duties under any circumstances. Their job is to uphold the law, and that's final. The problem with that is that if you open that can of worms up, you have things like what happened earlier this week, where now we have an atheist in Rowan County refusing to pay taxes. And then what? How far does it go? I don't like using the slippery slope argument because it's sort of a fallacy, but at the end of the day, people who volunteer to serve their government must do their jobs, period.
Thank you, Patrick. Thank you. There you go. We are getting a ton of social media reaction this evening. We have yet another Twitter question just coming in from Eric Jude. Dear future governor, he writes, what will you do to raise Eastern Kentucky from the bottom of the U.S. economic barrel? We'll begin with Mr. Bevin, 45 seconds.
I think, again, economic prosperity affects every single person in Kentucky. It's not just Eastern Kentucky or Western Kentucky. The question was specific about Eastern Kentucky. But frankly, if there's a hole in the boat and we're all in the boat, all our feet are going to get wet. We need more jobs for young people. We need education that prepares people for the modern day workforce. We need to have higher expectations of young people with respect to participating in the workforce. We should not have able-bodied, working-age men and women who do not have children choosing as a lifestyle to be on the draw, as it is called, in Eastern Kentucky and in other places as well. That's not acceptable. We need to demand more of people and create a strong economy where there is opportunity for people in every part of the state to participate.
Drew Curtis, 45 seconds.
So it turns out I was lucky enough to have founded a technology.
First is a big deal, but it's being done by a public-private partnership. And again, it's questionable whether or not my opponent supports public-private partnerships. Transportation needs in Eastern Kentucky are great. My opponent said earlier that he did not say he would have let the gas tax fall to zero and audit the cabinet for 10 years. That's what he said. Too many people in Eastern Kentucky are addicted. That's the reason I have fought the scourge of prescription pills. And I think if we have early childhood education opportunities for children in Eastern Kentucky, they'll go on to become better students and better workers.
And we have one more question from social media. This comes in just now from Steve Everett. He says, Governor Beshear's legacy is likely to be the successful health insurance exchange. If elected, what would you like your legacy to be? Jack Conway, we'll start with you, 45 seconds.
If I were fortunate enough to be governor of the Commonwealth of Kentucky and could really work on the issue of early childhood education, and if I could get us to a place where people said about Kentucky that they focused on kindergarten readiness, that their kids are ready to go to school. If we could work together over 4 or 8 years to make certain that 3 and 4-year-olds at 200% of federal poverty or below get into early childhood education, that's how you break the cycle of poverty in a state like Kentucky. It's in my education plan. I hope people go and look at it at conwayoverly.com. But it's something that I believe in passionately, and I think it can help us break the cycle of our poverty in the state. And there's a big difference between the campaigns on this issue.
Matt Bevin, 45 seconds.
I'll tell you what, Kentucky could be so much greater than we are right now on almost any number of fronts. If you afford me the opportunity to be the next governor of this state, I will lead this state with a passion and a conviction the likes of which we've not seen for quite some time. I believe in Kentucky. I'm passionate about the opportunities before us. And a legacy that I would be proud of would be that 4 and 14 and 40 years from now, the governors of Indiana and the governors of Tennessee and of Texas and of South Carolina and wherever else, they wonder why our children are going to Kentucky to get a job. That is possible. We could be the manufacturing hub of America. We've got the geographic location, the seasons, the shipping hubs, the riverways and roadways. It is my intention to fight every single day with the power within me to ensure that we become the greatest version of ourselves that we can be.
Drew Curtis, 45 seconds.
As a digital entrepreneur, I am tantalized by the potential of how easily available technologies, which are now pushing 20 and 25 years old, could be deployed in government to make things better. For example, online licensing or using deep data algorithms to determine which roads need to be fixed before anybody ever calls about it, or using Twitter deep dives to find out which locations in towns happen to be sick and identify this in advance. These things have been in practice for almost 20 years now, and it has not been utilized at the government level at all. And that's something that I can bring to the table as somebody who has designed software systems more or less for a living for his entire lifetime, and I would really look forward to doing that.
Now perhaps the most challenging part of our Bluegrass poll debate, challenging politicians to answer a question with one word. For instance, mutton or pork? Okay, that fancy part. Renee Murphy actually has a serious question, a one-word question for our candidates, and we'll start with General Conway and progress toward me.
Okay, it can be 2 words. I'm breaking the rules a little bit.
Oh, good.
Which journalist do you trust the most?
You.
Drew?
Bill Bryant, without a doubt.
I'm going to go with Joe because he's leaving.
Safe out. Joe Girth.
Outside of your wives and running mates, who do you rely on most for political advice?
John Conway?
Corinne Llewellyn.
Social media.
There's no single person.
Then we'll go to, next is Sam Youngman.
I'm going to pull a bit of an audible here and not go with my prepared question, because I think this is something we all care about. Wildcats or Cardinals?
We'll start on this end now. Matt Bevin.
One word, really?
Mr. Curtis?
You can't say Duke, I'm sorry.
At least I tell the truth about going to college.
Wildcats.
Mr. Conway?
Both.
And who's next? Mr. Bryant.
Do you support Kentucky joining the other states that regulate drones?
We'll start with Drew Curtis.
Absolutely. I've got a longer answer, though.
Matt Bevin.
Yes.
Mr. Conway.
Yes.
There you have it. Well, that will conclude our questions from our panelists. Good job, guys, with the one-word answers to a certain extent. And each candidate now will have 1 minute for a closing statement. We'll begin now with Matt Bevin.
Again, I appreciate all of you being here. I appreciate those of you that are watching at home. You have a decision to make in 7 weeks. Who do you trust to take this state forward? Who do you trust your livelihood to? If you had to choose one of the 3 of us on this stage, which of us would you leave your business to? Which of us would you believe would have the ability to create the type of environment in this state to ensure that your children and your grandchildren will have opportunity here? I'm a husband, I'm a father of 9 children. I'm a U.S. Army veteran. I'm a small business owner. I have spent my entire life creating opportunity, not only for myself and my family, but for others as well. I employ dozens and dozens of people. This is what I do, this is my passion. My commitment to you is that I will fight for you like I would fight for my own family. And I will defend this state at every turn, like I defended this nation when I wore her uniform 25 years ago.
Drew Curtis.
One of the things that's been sort of confusing to me when I discovered the problem of the pension system was I couldn't figure out why anybody who couldn't come up with a solution for it would want this job. It means you're an automatic one-term governor when it comes right down to it. And had I not found a plan that I thought that would have a reasonable chance of success, and I kid you not, I would not be standing out in front of you here today. Because why would you want to run headlong into a sure one-term governorship? That's something that I intend to avoid. But that's not the only problem we have coming up either. Then we have a recession coming up on deck after that. And then about 5 years out, you have driverless cars on deck. They're going to throw out people who drive for a living, and they're going to be out of work. And this was said in a TED Talk this year by the head of Google's driverless car program, mostly because his daughter turned 16 that year, and he fears he needs to get there in advance. We need a governor who can take a look forward and anticipate problems before they actually occur. And I don't think we currently have that, and that's no offense to these guys here. I don't think that's actually been done in American politics before. That is the thing that I'm looking to change. Only one of us up here is independent, and that's me.
Jack Conway.
Well, first of all, I want to thank Bellarmine University. I want to thank the debate partners. And Joe, I want to thank you. We'll miss you on the campaign trail. Your smile always made it brighter, and you will be missed. I do mean that. So to the people of Kentucky, I want to say, look, I understand Kentucky. I've delivered for Kentucky, and I have a plan for Kentucky. I hope people will go to conwayoverley.com and check out our jobs plan for the future of Kentucky. It focuses on building on our strengths, our unique strengths that we have in each of our regions here in the Commonwealth of Kentucky. It focuses on creating the right type of climate to grow businesses for the jobs of the future. And it also focuses on training a workforce for the future because, folks, we have a skills gap in this state. Please go to our website and check out our education plan for the future. Unlike my opponent, it focuses heavily on early childhood education and kindergarten readiness. It sets up a plan to help with financial readiness for students going off to colleges, and it encourages us to be more efficient. I've delivered as your Attorney General. I've cut my office's budget by 40%. I've done more with less, and I'd be honored to have your vote on November the 3rd.
That concludes this evening's Bluegrass Poll debate. Our coverage continues online at 11 p.m. tonight on both WHAS 11 and WKYT TV, as well as in the Lexington Herald Leader and Louisville Courier-Journal newspapers. We encourage you to share your comments and continue to comment using that hashtag Bluegrass Debate. Our next Bluegrass Poll of this statewide election will be released September 30th on all 4 of our Bluegrass Poll partners. Now, please join me in thanking our panelists and our candidates and Bellarmine University.
Good job, Kentucky. It was a good day for Kentucky. It was a good debate. It was a good conversation.
Again, thank you for watching this evening, and good night from Louisville and Bellarmine University.
All right, that concludes the first televised gubernatorial debate between Jack Conway, Matt Bevin, and independent Drew Curtis. A huge number of topics were able to be discussed in this hour. A lot of talk about, of course, the Kim Davis issue. Coal was brought up. There was a question specifically about Eastern Kentucky from Twitter, I believe, asking the candidates how they would raise Eastern Kentucky from the bottom of the economic barrel. Just a variety of hot-button issues discussed tonight. Several lighthearted moments, not too many very tense moments, although there were a couple here and there, but pretty civil for the most part. I don't think there was any clear winner. I'm sure some people would disagree with that, but you can weigh in on Facebook and Twitter and tell us who you think the winner was. As Joe Arnold said, you can continue to use the hashtag Bluegrass Debate. As he said, the next Bluegrass poll will be released September 30th. Should be very interesting with the results, since there hasn't been a Bluegrass poll now in a little while. We also want to remind you of a couple of things coming up. We will also have coverage of a debate between the candidates for Lieutenant Governor next Wednesday, September 23rd, and live coverage of another gubernatorial debate on October 25th. That one from Eastern Kentucky University, and that one, of course, will be just before the election in early November. We'll announce more specifics on how you can see those debates as we get closer to them. And we'll also have a wrap-up of tonight's debate here on Mountain News at 11 o'clock. One other thing I wanted to get in real quick, the Middlesboro moist vote. Middlesboro has voted to go moist, a close vote, 1298 yes, 1178 no. Those are the unofficial votes. We'll also have more on that tonight at 11. Thanks for joining us, and good night.
Live well with diabetes. Attend the Knott County Health Department's free diabetes self-management class September 24th.